Hey there, parenting can be a struggle. It can be even more of a struggle if you and your partner are not on the same page. So today, I'm going to be sharing some tips and strategies that you can use to try to improve communication and get together as a unified parental front. Let's get to it. So today I thought I'd talk about some of the things that I wish I had done and known earlier when becoming a mom as related to communication and being part of a parental unit. I feel like the first couple of years of marriage were very much about asserting ourselves and figuring out like how are we going to be together as a couple. And we finally got that sorted out, and then lo and behold, boom, here comes our son, and it threw everything out of whack. So I wanted to talk about some of the things that I wish I had known then that I know now, as well as some of the things that I've learned over the years, not only in working on communication and understanding and compromise within my own marriage and family, but also with the work that I've done as a home visitor for 30 years. Whether you're a couple just starting out or you're in the mix of it and have families, one thing that I highly recommend that couples do is to both identify, sit down and have a discussion about what your vision is for your family. And by that I mean writing down, where do we see ourselves in a year? Where are we in 5 years? Where are we in 10 years? Where are we in 25 years? That vision and your expectations, and I'm talking about things as deep as, beyond how many kids do we want to have, but as deep as what do we want our family gatherings to look like 25 years from now? What's the feeling in our home? How are we communicating with each other? How often do we hear from our kids? How often do they visit us? Having that vision and knowing what you want it to look like in 25 years will then allow you to make more actionable choices and decisions in creating a plan to achieve that. So here are some conversation starters for a young couple that are starting out. There should be a conversation around employment. If you're talking about starting a family, you got to figure out what's going to happen with jobs. Are both of you going to work? Is one of you going to stay home and be a primary caretaker? Do you plan to work from home? And if so, how are you going to manage the kids? Do you plan to work remotely? What is that going to look like? And then subsequently, if you are going to work full-time jobs, then looking at daycare. What are we thinking for daycare? Do we want a family member to take care of our children? Do we want to look at a daycare center? Do we want to think about getting a nanny? Already having those thoughts and being on the same page about that can make it easier when the time comes to both feel confident in the plan moving forward because you've already discussed this. Another topic would be thinking about education. This is one that my husband and I had a long discussion with before we had kids, deciding on whether or not we wanted to do public school or private school or homeschool. These are important things to hash out prior to having your kids. Another one would be, looking at what kind of income do we need to support the lifestyle that we see ourselves doing. If we want to buy a home, how are we going to do that financially if only one of us is working? What are we going to have to do to be able to, get that down payment? So thinking about, if you want to do a lot of traveling, how are we going to do that? How do we plan to afford those things? What level of monthly income are we going to need to meet our needs and be able to maintain the lifestyle that we want for our family? Another one would be, what will we do to maintain and strengthen our relationship as our family grows? And I'm going to talk about that more in depth in a moment. What values do we want to instill in our children? What things are important to us? What things do we each need to work on ourselves to improve our relationship as well as our ability to be a parent? And there I'm talking about, is somebody dealing with a mental health issue, anxiety or depression or anger management issues, but talking about how do we plan to handle challenging behaviors? Having these conversations about, are we going to yell? Are we going to spank? Do we want to try to use a different approach? Making sure that you're on the same page. Sometimes we've come from very different backgrounds when we join together as husband and wives. And, somebody may have come from a home where, spare the rod, spoil the child was the mentality. And that's something that maybe goes against the other spouse's experiences growing up where it was a very safe and loving and nurturing environment. So you want to make sure that you guys are already having those conversations about what you think you want to do as far as dealing with challenging behaviors, what kind of communication style you want to have with your children. It's never too early to have those talks. And then finally, what level of involvement do you want from your extended family? Now, most of us want involvement from our extended family, but what I'm talking about here is some of us come to our relationships and marriages with maybe a toxic family environment, or with well-intended in-laws that can be slightly overbearing or condescending or intrusive. So you want to talk to each other about those kinds of situations and how you plan to deal with them, so you can make sure that you're both on the same page. For those of you who are in the mix of it, you've already got kids, here are some tips on how you can work towards improving your communication with your partner. Keeping in mind that your relationship with each other sets the tone for the entire family. You are the foundation on which the home that is your family is built. And your children will learn from your example about what to expect in relationships with a significant other. And that's whether it's good or bad. So my first tip is to find time to connect every day and have time with each other every week. I suggest to parents trying to find at least 10 to 15 minutes every day where you can give yourselves undivided attention to talk about what's going well, what's not going well, and what you need to focus on. A lot of families do this after their kids are in bed or early in the morning before they wake up. If you guys are working different shifts, maybe on your spouse's lunch hour, you can sneak away and do a 10-minute check-in via FaceTime. The goal is that each day, at some point, you are connecting with each other to discuss your family without any distractions. So that means no TV, no telephone, no iPads. Some families find it helpful to do their connecting in a different location in the home than where they're normally hanging out. So, for example, my husband and I like to sit outside on our swing when it's warm out, and that's where we've had a lot of deep and difficult and very, very valuable conversations. So if you're able to, or struggle to have those conversations in your normal hangout area, maybe try to have those conversations in a different area, like at the dinner table. Next, you want to be willing to compromise and support your spouse. I want to share an example of a home visit that I was on many years ago with a couple who had 2 little boys. While I was there, the little boys went over to the bookshelves and pulled every single DVD, which they probably had 200 of them, off of the shelf. The mom was frustrated. She said, "This happens all the time. He lets the boys pull these off, and it drives me crazy." I asked the dad about it, and he's like, "Well, it doesn't really bother me. We'll just work together to put them back on." He was missing the point that this was something that was a trigger for mom. It really, really frustrated her, and she wanted his support from it. Now, conversely, there was a situation that happened with the boys at the dinner table that really, really frustrated the dad. And the mom was like, "But that doesn't really bother me, so I don't make a big deal out of it." So there was her opportunity to support her husband. So even though it might be something that doesn't necessarily bother you, if it's something that bothers your spouses and they would like your support in addressing it, then you should address it. And then the expectation that they would do the same for you. It just makes you both feel valued and heard. Next up, reevaluate your responsibilities in the home on a regular basis. Anybody here, hands up if you feel like you're doing the lion's share of work at home? This is where I suggest to parents to sit down on one of these connection times, each of you with a piece of paper, and write down all of the responsibilities that you take care of on a weekly basis or a daily basis. I like to do weekly and daily because I have found over the years, at least in my own personal situation, that many of my husband's tasks were done once a week, where many of my tasks were done every single day. So then you can sit and look at these lists together and figure out, how can we make this more equitable? If I'm doing all of the cooking, then perhaps you can be clearing the table and loading the dishwasher. Or if I'm going to be doing the laundry, perhaps you could take care of giving the kids a bath and putting them to bed at night. So it's really important to write it down, because that visual component is really important. A lot of times we tell people, I do this and this and this and this and this, and it kind of goes in one ear and out the other. When we have that tangible written evidence in front of us, it's a little bit more difficult to be dismissive of it. So Make and evaluate your roles and responsibilities, make a list, sit down, have a conversation about it, and then work together on how we can compromise so that we're both feeling like we're equally contributing to the household. Okay, I want to move on and talk about communication roles because this is usually where the train goes off the track. Keeping in mind that 93% of communication is body language and tone of voice, we need to be cognizant of that when we're having deep and difficult discussions with our partners. Productive conversations with positive outcomes can only happen when we feel safe, secure, loved, seen, and heard. So here are some of my Mentor Mom communication rules. The first one is to use I statements. This is Assertiveness 101. Using I statements can prevent defensiveness from our partners. When we say things like you always this or you never that, a wall goes up. Listening isn't happening. They're already internally thinking, oh my God, here we go again. Here he's saying that. I get so tired of hearing that. They're not even listening to us anymore. They're feeling angry, frustrated. They're not feeling valued. When we use an I statement, the formula is I blank when blank. So an example would be, I feel frustrated when I make dinner and I have to do all of the clearing of the table and washing the dishes. I would like some support with some of the dinner time routine from you. That has a different flavor than saying, you never help me and I'm sick and tired of doing the dishes all the time. We get a lot more compliance from folks when we use I statements. And will it always result in our partner stepping up and doing what it is that we're asking? No. But are we carrying it around, like holding it all in, thinking, oh, yeah, I wish he would help me. Why doesn't he ever step up and take care of the dishes? It's so frustrating. Being assertive means we put it out there to the world so we're not carrying it around inside anymore. The next rule is not to have conversations when you're an emotional hot mess. If you're feeling really, really angry, that is not the time to have the conversation because that's when we say things that we can't take back and leads to hard feelings and resentment. It doesn't work for our kids to talk to us when they're angry. It's not going to work for us. Calm yourself down, take some deep breaths, have the conversation when you're in a calm frame of mind. My next rule is never bring up the past. That's fighting dirty. The past is the past. We can't change it. It's over and it's done with, and we need to let go of it. We need to focus on the here and the now and moving forward. When we bring up the past, we just end up in these almost like script arguments with our partners that we just never ever resolve to. It's unproductive, it's frustrating, and it just drives a bigger wedge in between the two of you. So focus on the here and the now and moving forward. If you're trying to get your partner to listen to or understand a different point of view than perhaps his or hers, it's going to be much easier to do that by asking them questions than it is telling them why you're right or why your way is the best way. So, for example, if your partner feels like physical discipline is the way to go so that their child will respect them, and maybe that's the way that they were raised, rather than saying, well, you know that that's not right and I don't want to do that, blah, 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 it's going to be much easier to help them see a different point of view when they don't feel like yours is being jammed down their throat. And this is best done through questions. So asking questions like, did you have physical discipline when you were a child? And, if they say, well, yeah, I got spanked all the time and it was no big deal, asking, well, I'm just wondering, I wasn't spanked as a child. So what did that feel like afterwards? Do you remember how it felt after your parent hit you? What did that feel like afterwards? Did you feel connected to your parent? And really asking it in a genuine way, right? You're not asking it to be snarky or anything like, well, how did you feel when your parent hit you? You really want to ask it in a genuine way to try to open up that conversation, to help guide them to maybe looking at a deeper perspective on something that they've typically kind of shut the door on. So use the power of questions to help bring awareness to your partner and help them potentially understand and look at different perspectives on things related to raising your kids and your relationship. The next one seems quite obvious, but I still have to say it. No name calling and no yelling when we're having difficult conversations. Name calling, what that does is it's putting me up here by putting you down there. And that's just not acceptable for communication interaction between two people who love each other. Which leads me to my next rule. Model good, healthy boundaries. Now, this can be particularly challenging if you've come from a past where this wasn't modeled for you. And my tip is to discuss these ground rules together during one of your connection moments before you start implementing. Doing the prep work and having that conversation beforehand is going to make it easier in the heat of the moment. So, for example, if you've both agreed that there isn't going to be any yelling during your conversations, when one of you falls into that old pattern, the other can say something like, "I'm more than happy to hear what it is that you have to say if you can talk to me in a calm voice like I'm talking to you. If you're not able to do that, I'm going to walk away, let you cool down, and we'll try this again when you're calmer." So I'm not going to lie, it's not going to be easy to do this initially, but with time and practice and repetition, it will become more natural and easier. And I assure you, you are going to see huge growth in your communication with each other as a couple. The next rule is to be a good listener. So in order to be a good listener, that means you have to let your partner finish their point. No interrupting. Once they finish their point, you restate their point. So it sounds like what I'm hearing you say is that you find it frustrating when I move your things because you can't find them when you need them. You then want to concede or validate their point by saying something to the effect of, "I can understand that. I would probably feel the same way if you moved my things." Then you can work on finding a solution. So for example, what if we put a basket on the counter and I place your mail and items in there? Would that be a reasonable compromise? Using this kind of listening style and stating things back and using empathy helps your partner feel seen, heard, respected, loved, and safe. And that leads to better outcomes. Being able to model healthy conflict resolution and communication with your significant other is going to be a valuable, valuable gift for your child. And that's going to serve them well in the future. They will be able to see that people who love each other can feel frustrated, upset, or angry with each other. They can talk about their feelings in a safe manner, in a respectful manner. They can resolve and find a solution to the problem, and they can reconnect with each other. What a valuable gift that would be for them to take into their relationships in the future. That is it, my friend. Those are the Mentor Mom tips for improving communication with your partner. I hope you found this information helpful. If you did, if you could give me a like and a subscribe, it would be greatly appreciated. It helps me get my content out in front of other parents who are looking for support. All right, that is it for this week. Until next time, my friend.